Hey everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel. So obviously you guys know what this video is going to be about. I am filming this in the middle of August, but I'm already getting into the fall mood and I'm so ready to start planning my cozier, darker fall TBR. And because of that, I figured that a lot of you were kind of in the same boat, so I wanted to recommend some perfect fall books for this year. I believe that I have 9 books to recommend. 4 of them I physically own, and then the other 5 are ones that I have read as like audiobooks, but I love them all so much and I think that you guys are gonna love them as well. So to start off in this fall recommendations video, I wanted to recommend Katherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. I feel like this is one of the like quintessential dark academia books, and basically this book follows Inez, and she has been chosen to attend Katherine House, which is a very prestigious and elite and very selective private college. And basically at Katherine House, when you go there, you attend for I believe like 3 years, and they take away all of your connections to the outside world. You're not allowed to like call anybody or message anybody or send them letters or whatever. You are just completely immersed within the curriculum at Katherine House, all the people that are also attending, and that is your entire world. So this book obviously has a lot of critiques on like the private education system. There are also some spookier and darker elements that I really liked, and overall this just has a very like gothic horror feel to it, which I absolutely love. And it's part of why I highly recommend this book, because I love gothic horror. It's definitely something that I've been exploring a lot more in the past few years, and I've just found that it's one of my favorite subgenres of horror, and it's kind of been my gateway into like those darker themes. So yeah, highly recommend Katherine House, and if you haven't picked it up, I think that it's high time that you do. The next book also has sort of that like gothic horror element to it, but it does lean more contemporary fantasy, and that is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I absolutely loved this book last year. It was so good. This is one that I picked up last year that I just had no idea was going to affect me in the way that it did, and really sort of become one of like my new favorite books of all time. This book is set in a small town in Kentucky, and there is a very like spooky and mysterious large mansion-like house that has always had people like kind of coming and going over the years, and it originally was owned by a very mysterious children's author, and this author wrote a book that is like very similar to Alice in Wonderland but a little bit darker. Anyway, this house is very mysterious and the main character is very intrigued by it, and she sort of strikes up this deal with the current keeper of the house and ends up working there. And the main character, Opal, she is trying to take care of her younger brother. They don't really have any other surviving family members, and it's just kind of like a rough time for both of them. So she's really trying to figure out how she can support her younger brother and also figure out a lot of the mysteries surrounding the Starling House. It just hit me while I was in the middle of recommending this book that I did read it this year. I don't know why I said that I read it last year, but I did read it this year because I did mention it in my mid-year book freakout tag, where I mentioned that one of the characters in this book, Arthur, is one of my new favorite characters of the year so far. They're actually both kind of my favorite characters. I love Opal, I love Arthur. I think that they are great separately but also together, and this is just a really, really fantastic book. The prose is so beautiful. It's really engaging. You really feel like you're transported to this small town in Kentucky. It's very magical but dark, and I think that it's perfect for the fall season. The next book is one that is basically made for fall slash autumn, and that is Autumn by Ali Smith. I loved this book so much. This one is definitely for more of my literary fiction readers, and I think that if you're wanting something that is very warm and nostalgic but also very like introspective, this would be the perfect book for you. And for me, it really went by so much faster than I thought it would. It was such a good book, and there are so many parts of it that I just underlined the absolute living shit out of. And the prose in this book is just out of this world. It is so beautiful. It's really hard to explain exactly what this book is about because it kind of follows this young woman's life from when she was younger to when she's an adult. And she lived with her mom, and next door they had this author that was living there, and he was much older, and he kind of acts as sort of a mentor to her. And this has a lot of like conversations about emotions and family, but also social issues. And I really enjoyed this book. It was so fantastic. There's so much packed into it. It is part of a quartet that basically explores each of the seasons. So there's autumn, I have spring somewhere over here, there's summer, there's winter. But yeah, I have read this one and absolutely loved it and highly recommend it. The last one out of my physical copies is another dark academia, and that is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I loved this book so much. I believe that I finished it in December of last year, but I just loved this book so much. And basically this book is about a girl named Effie, and since childhood she has been kind of haunted by these dreams of the Fairy King. She has become really attached to and interested in a popular book within this world. And so when she kind of like goes off to higher education, she goes to a prestigious architecture college, and she kind of gets a chance to help redesign the late author's estate. And so she takes that chance and ends up finding out that she kind of has to do it alongside this guy that she doesn't really get along with very well. But yeah, this book just really transported me into this world, and also it really just felt like the way that Hosier songs sound like, and it kind of made me want to go to Ireland. It just really had that vibe to it, and I think that it's just perfect for the months when, you know, it starts to get darker and gloomier and a little bit rainier. And I think it's just a really fun dark academia book. Not quite as scary as some of the other ones have been, but definitely a lot of fun. Okay, moving into the books that I've read as audiobooks, I highly recommend You Again by Kate Goldbeck. I loved this book so much. If you are a fan of When Harry Met Sally, that movie, this is the perfect book for you. It is so good. It follows these two characters over quite a few years, and you kind of get to see them through their different relationships, through their friendships, and they're always kind of finding their way back to each other and being in each other's lives and being friends. But there's always that sort of like underlying romantic feeling between the two of them. And this is one of those romance books that is perfectly categorized as a rom-com because it's actually funny. There were so many moments in this book where I found myself genuinely laughing at the things that the characters were saying or doing, and so I just felt like this was absolutely perfect. It is a quintessential fall book. Like, if you just look at the cover, it just screams fall. I highly recommend this book. It is so much fun. These two characters are just absolutely hilarious, and the chemistry between them is so palpable and so undeniable. I feel like if you're a fan of any Nora Ephron movie or even like any Emily Henry book, I feel like you are absolutely gonna love this one. The next book is an adult fantasy, and that is The Foxglove King by Hannah F. Whitten. I read this book earlier this year and I absolutely loved it. It was one of those adult fantasy books where I read it and I just like instantly got energized about adult fantasy. I did post a video a few months ago talking about how I feel like there are a lot of issues currently in the adult fantasy space, and I do definitely stand by that, but this is one of those books that kind of like renewed my interest into the fantasy genre and got me excited about it again and got me feeling like maybe we could be heading in the right direction. I felt like it was so perfectly paced. The prose was absolutely incredible. It was one of those like love triangle scenarios that like really worked for me because both of these guys are I think like objectively pretty good options, but they're also like very much in love with her, and it makes sense for them to both be in love with her, and like the history is there between both of them, like all three of them actually. I could also see kind of like a case being made for a little bit of like a throuple situation. But I just absolutely fell in love with this book. It is a little complicated to explain. I feel like it's one of those kind of books where you want to go in not knowing absolutely everything about it before going in, because it's going to be presented to you as you go along. And it's, like I said, it's perfectly paced, because too often I read these fantasy books and I feel like I'm constantly getting info dumped on instead of learning things in a more natural progression. And this book definitely did not have that issue, so I absolutely love it. It has like that perfect fall vibe to it. It's very dark, it's very mysterious, there's a lot of things to uncover. I love the romance, I love the characters. It was just such a fun book. Definitely perfect for like a reader who wants kind of like a whimsical fantasy, but also wants something a little bit more serious. There's some like political intrigue, some fantasy religious exploration, and yeah, just I highly recommend this book. One of my favorite adult fantasies of all time. Speaking of fantasy books, I also highly recommend Midnight Strikes by Zeba Shanaz, and I loved this one so much. This is a time loop fantasy, and I haven't really personally read very many time loop fantasies. There's not a lot for me to kind of like compare it to, but I absolutely loved it, and it kind of got me a little bit more intrigued by the time loop notion. I remember going into it being like, I don't really know how I'm gonna feel about this, but we'll see. And I'm so glad that I gave it a chance, because I absolutely loved it. And basically it's about this girl named Anais, and she is a little bit of an outsider in this kingdom. I believe that her parents come from a foreign title, but when she's within this kingdom, she feels like she doesn't really belong there, and she's not really super interested in making her social debut. And she finds out that there's a plot to set off explosives during the ball, and she is the only one who can really stop it from happening. However, when the bombs do go off and she believes that she's died, she's actually woken up that same exact day and is gonna live it all over again. And she has to figure out how to stop the time loop and how to stop the bombs from going off. I absolutely love this book. I thought it was fantastic. I love the prose. I thought that the main character was really interesting, and I thought the world was really interesting as well. I remember going into it being a little bit worried that I would get bored or annoyed by a similar scenario playing out over and over again, but I thought that it was really well done, and I think that the author really navigated that plot line well. I just remember reading it and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so intelligent, and so like the pieces were moving. It felt a lot like chess, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, highly recommend it for fall. I think it'd be a perfect fantasy read. The second to last book is another sort of like dark academia fantasy novel, and that is The Library of Shadows by Rachel Moore. I absolutely loved this book. This one sort of has a ghost element to it, which I really loved and appreciated. It's about this main character named Esty, and she ends up enrolling into this private school that her dad once went to. He has since passed, unfortunately, but she wants to kind of like reconnect with his past and like understand him a little bit better. And so when she gets there, she ends up running into this boy, and she finds out that he is actually a ghost. And when she ends up meeting this guy, she kind of gets framed for stealing a very important book. And so she has to kind of like track this ghost down, and figure out where the book went and how to get it back. And I really love this book. I think that dark academia is just the perfect genre to read during the fall. Dark academia, fantasy, literary fiction, I feel like those are just like the ultimate trifecta of fall reads, and this one is just absolutely no exception. It's a really fun book, and if you are the type of person who's really into ghosts or hauntings, I highly recommend picking up this one. And the very last book that I have to recommend is A Proposal They Can't Refuse. This is another adult romance, and I think that this is one that I would say could be another good contender for a true rom-com. It is very funny, which I highly appreciated. But this one is sort of like an enemies to lovers, fake engagement sort of scenario. Basically, it's about a Puerto Rican chef and an Irish American distiller, a whiskey distiller, and their sort of families who are very entwined with each other. They have a lot of history together, but these two specific characters have always sort of butted heads over the years. But when one of them finds out that their grandpa is not doing well, they end up kind of getting into this fake engagement sort of ordeal. And of course, romantic shenanigans ensue. And this is just such a fun book. I had such an incredible time reading it. I feel like I've seen a few people pick it up recently and be like, oh my gosh, this book is so good. Why hasn't anybody talked about this book? It's fantastic. And I just feel like I want to scream, yes, I've been talking about this book for so long. Please pick it up. It is so, so good. I loved these two main characters. I thought they were really headstrong, really intriguing, and they just like ended up naturally working so well together. And there were just so many moments in this book that just had me like giggling and kicking my legs and swooning. And the reason that I wanted to include this in a fall book recommendations video is because it is set during the fall. There is like a sort of like a fall foodie festival. They go to a pumpkin patch. It's really cute, and it's kind of like the perfect fall romance book. So yeah, those are all of the books that I wanted to recommend for this specific video. I might make another one in the future, in the very near future, because it is only halfway through August. We aren't even into fall yet. So maybe in like a month or so, I might have to make a whole other video recommending some more fall books. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this entire recommendations video. I hope it gave you some ideas of what to include on your fall TBR. And if you are just as excited about fall as I am, leave a comment down below with a little pumpkin emoji. That'd be really cute. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links are down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!